Giants are one of those units that, despite having several clear upsides, don't see a whole lot of use due to a variety of reasons. Primarily their slow speed and low defensive stats. I mean, they do have really good HP and leadership, but their armor and melee defense is obviously quite low. I made a whole video in the past of comparing all the various giant types on their rosters, which one's the best. Today, I'm going to be taking two giants into what I consider to be one of their best matchups because they won't face any enemy missiles. That is, of course, vampire counts. Apologies about my voice, guys. I had a little bit too much fun over the holidays, and it's a little bit knackered, but there you go. I'm up against the Emperor, my patron here. He's going with the foul vampire counts, led by Heinrich Kemmler. We've also got Black Knights and Blood Knights mixed with Vargulfs. Yeah, one Vargulf at least out on that flank. Some Crypt Horrors, Necromancer, and a White King on foot. Necromancer being on an unholy lodestone, it looks like. Yep, more Black Knights. Dire Wolves, Dire Pack out here. Plenty of Zombos up front for myself. Going a heavy monster build. Goblin Great Shaman on the Spider. Two Giants, two Black Orcs. Unbreakable 8-peak loons in the center. We've also got the Black Orc Big Boss just for one more single entity. Does not have the immune to psychology because none of these infantry units need it. Instead just has the Brass Cleaver melee attack buff to juice up all the Black Orcs and the Gobos here. 44 attack on the 8-peak loons. Doesn't look like it's actually hitting either of those Black Orcs. Also got some Skirmish Cav. Spider Rider, Wolf Rider Archers mixed in here. Mangy Marauders also. So we're going to get things started. Obviously not much to do except for the Giants and the Black Orcs to try and fight together. The 8-peak loons as well going to come in here. Maybe try and get a little bit of a Fanatics cast down the line. In the back, I'm going to set my cavalry onto skirmish mode. This is one of the few times where, like, I want to prioritize this frontline micro, make sure I get my Fanatics casts off, make sure I get good spell placement and everything. So I'm going to actually put these troops into skirmish mode. Now, there's some benefits and some drawbacks to that. They are going to continue to flee, obviously, from these Dire Pack, but sometimes they don't take the best pathing. The Dire Pack very likely will be able to catch them at some point, or perhaps not. Perhaps they'll also drop their attack orders, but in the central blob here, there's not really too much to talk about. Giant's going to be fighting the Vargulf. Also, Kemmler just taking a bunch of damage. If I could perhaps snipe out Kemmler here, that would be fantastic. I do have Vindictive Glare, and the 8-peak loons coming in a little bit late there as they do unleash their Fanatics through that. Blob does a brutal amount of damage, though. Cutting through a lot of that chaff there, helping to thin them out. Black Knights took a bunch of damage there, so that's great. But you can see the Death's Creepers getting caught by Dire Wolves out there. They should be able to win that engagement, actually. More importantly, the Mangy Marauders with their AAP, I really need to keep them safe. But I've momentarily taken them off skirmish mode, and the Dire Pack are going to catch them here. This is a great get for the Emperor, taking out these armor-piercing missile cavalry who otherwise would be able to just run around and continually harass these Black Knights and Blood Knights. The Black Knights have taken significant damage in many pockets. The Blood Knights are still doing pretty good here. But, let's see. Yeah, the Giants, again, just fighting on top of the Black Orcs is going to be pretty important. This Attrition game will favor the Vampire counts to a degree. Krell also being summoned in here, help contribute some damage for the Vampire counts. He does obviously count as another big armor-piercing single entity. You can see him kind of rear-attacking Bob here. Bob's going to turn around and try and strike back at Foul Krell. It's actually a pretty fun matchup. I haven't probably seen them fight head-to-head before, but some more Fanatics going to be released through the chaff here. Plenty of numbers for the Vampire counts left. I mean, we came into this battle outnumbered 3-1 by Undead, so you'd expect it to be pretty painful. But the White King getting soloed out here by the Giant is fantastic. A lot of healing sustained still in here, though, and this blob fight does favor Kemmler pretty significantly. All of these units are getting the Chaos Tomb Blade, right? So I talk all the time on this channel about stacking Vampire counts healing, and Kemmler has been a staple of that for quite some time. That Chaos Tomb Blade, not only does it give melee attack and 8 hit points per second in an area of effect, it also can replenish the actual combatants. So not only does it heal the HP, but it can actually resurrect unit models, which is not true of pretty much all the other passive healing effects from Lore of Vampires, right? The lore attribute of Kemmler and of Lore of Vampires will actually resurrect unit models, as will Invocation to Heck, but the regular, like Master of the Dead, for example, you can see does not. However, Chaos Tomb Blade does, so that extra melee attack, regeneration, and resurrection of models is just so powerful. At this point, a lot of my skirmish cav has been chased off. I'm also mismicroing a little bit here. These guys really need to come in and start rear-firing these Black Knights and other units to make sure their leadership stays crumbling. I need as much damage as I can get at this point. Probably should have been using the, what is that? This spell there. Yeah, you can see I'm going after the Vargolf with that Vindictive Glare. Really, I should have been targeting Kemmler this whole time. If I would have been able to snipe Kemmler, that would have obviously got rid of a substantial amount of passive and active healing for the vampire counts. So that grinding attrition definitely coming back to haunt me. Kemmler, not only that, but Undeath Resurgent also juicing the melee defense of all of these units to help kind of counteract the little area of effect buffs of Bob and the WA, of course, as well. You can see a lot of these units getting their healing caps. The Crypt Horrors getting their healing cap. The Vargolf getting to its healing cap. Kemmler and the White King not quite, but Krell goes down there, so that the Krell summon fading does help out a little bit. We've got some Black Orcs coming back. The Skirmish Cavalry are able to come in and finish off this unit of Black Knights here, but you can see that the Goblin Great Shaman's not doing great on leadership, and both of the Giants are gone. The Blood Knights coming in and just doing so much damage here. The issue with the Greenskins Giants is they do lack defensive buffs, especially in comparison to something like Warriors of Chaos. Have access to lower metal. You have Stand or Die, which gives melee defense. Even the Beastmen and Norska, you could argue, have better defensive buffs. I mean, Beastmen's an interesting one. I guess I would have to look. I don't think they have any direct melee defense buffs. They have more melee attack-centric buffs. You do have, like, Enfeebling Foe, I guess, but the advantage of the Beastman Giant in its survivability is the fact that it can fight in the woods at full strength with that trait there. Crown of Command used on the Goblin Great Shaman to make him unbreakable briefly. As we try and make a last-ditch effort here, you can see the Skirmish Cavalry rear charging does force few units into crumbling, and it does end up being very close, but this one unit of Blood Knights and the fact that I just can't get rid of now the White King approaching his healing cap, Kemmler, these regenerating units and the single entities, along with the Blood Knights, of course, have been quite powerful, and it's just more than what I can deal with. The Skirmish Cavalry Miss Micro, I do think may have cost me a little bit. I don't know if I had them in the right position to contribute in this late game, if that would have been enough damage. It might have gotten rid of the Crypt Horrors at the very least. Maybe we could have forced the Vargolf into crumbling, but I really didn't have a lot to be able to deal with those Blood Knights. Yeah, maybe if the Mangy Marauders hadn't got completely savaged by the Dire Pack, that was definitely a pretty big Miss Micro by me. Dire Pack coming in and cleaning up 1100 damage value on my Skirmish Cavalry. Greenskin Skirmish Cav is some of the best in the game due to its cheapness and variety. You also get poison, so it's a lot to deal with, and especially for vampire counts who are somewhat vulnerable to Skirmish Cavalry in general. A great performance by the Dire Pack will help equalize that situation. Likewise, Crypt Horrors don't quite pay for themselves, neither does the Vargolf, but they tank out a lot of damage, and that value is not represented, obviously, in the damage value here. Blood Knights do legitimately carry some huge damage value. Black Knights not so much, even though I do like this unit quite a bit. Even in this matchup, they kind of got the anti-cavalry tools I did have focused them, rather than necessarily focusing the Blood Knights. I mean, granted, a lot of that's because the Emperor was doing a good job with his Blood Knight micro, not letting them get caught up in bad engagements. So credit to that. I guess maybe my coaching is helping somewhat. Also, this Skeleton Spear, I just wanted to point out, this is the Corpse Cart and Kemmler both regenerating and giving extra melee attack. I mean, what is that? Plus 10 melee attack in total and 10 hit points per second regeneration if you have the Corpse Cart plus Kemmler, right? And I think even 12 if Master of the Dead is also active. So 12 hit points per second, that is. So 850 value on a Skeleton Spear that costs 350 points is really good. And the credit to those AoE passive support abilities helping these guys, trade upwards into those giants so well. Skeleton Warriors, they're here also. Zombies, whatever. They're zombies. Kemmler and the White King do a pretty good job. Unfortunately, we don't get to see Krell's data, but I'm guessing he probably got some pretty good value. You would expect a lot of inflated value given the amount of healing that's going on in this Vampire Counts build, and that does show in the fact that like all of my units paid for themselves almost, except for the Skirmish Cavalry, and I still lost. That's just kind of how it goes against the Vampire Counts HP situation. But anyway, talking a little bit about specifically this matchup. So Giants, obviously, they're most vulnerable to something like Skeleton Spears, which is, there's ways you can get around that. Certainly, if the Skeleton Spears aren't juiced up with any buffs, they're less dangerous, right? But they do have access to some pretty easy buffs. So you may want to consider that as well. Blood Knights, though, obviously. I mean, that's no question that Blood Knights are the most threatening thing. That massive charge bonus and anti-large is brutal for Giants to have to stand up against. So, in my mind, the defensive buffs of Warriors of Chaos probably make this Giant the most survivable. If you really wanted to go all in and try and help him tank out against Blood Knights, there's a few things. Number one, the Cascading Fire Cloak is just an amazing buff all around for Giants, right? Extra melee defense is something they sorely need. It puts them above 50 melee defense, which is actually pretty good. The extra AP damage, of course, is very applicable. They have great AP damage for their cost, so this is a great kind of synergistic buff to give them. Archaon also comes with Standard Die, which is another melee defense buff. You can kind of layer in one after the other. Not to mention, Burning Head plus Crown of Domination are also good choices against the vampire counts, so there's some good direct synergy with Archaon. Other lores of magic, of course, you've got Lore of Metal, which does offer Glittering Robe. It's a fairly unusual spell. You don't see it a lot, but this is a pretty good niche application for it. It lasts 44 seconds of 60 armor on only 6 Winds of Magic. It is a pretty cheap cast, and with a pretty long uptime. 200-meter range is quite long as well. Puts the Giant up to 90 armor, which will help him resist a substantial amount of that Blood Knight damage. He'll still take a bit. I mean, you can just measure the performance. Blood Knights is something against like a Carnosaur, right? Or another monster that actually does have 90 armor base. You'll see they do still perform well, but it does help mitigate that damage substantially. Likewise, you've also got Transmutation of Lead, which is really not a spell I recommend taking. Mana efficiency-wise, it's pretty poor. I'd say just direct damaging the Blood Knights with Final Transmutation is going to be a better play, or else raining some Searing Doom on them is also pretty good against Heavy Cavalry. If they get hit by it, it does a hilarious amount of armor-piercing damage, actually, especially to Cavalry. But anyway, yeah. The Chaos Giant, I would say, in terms of defensive buffs, probably has the best access. You can hide your Beastman Giant in the woods. That gives him some defensiveness. Norska, too, I guess. I didn't really talk too much about, but you do have access to Lore Fire and Metal here as well. You don't get the Standard Die, but if you take a Werekin, you can actually get some extra armor just passively through this, which puts the Giant up around 53, which is all right. A little bit of extra missile resistance is really nice as well in certain matchups, although it's not 10% is not really enough to make a huge difference in order to help you survive. Like, it might help you survive against, like, Marauder Horsemen or, a kind of a more limited skirmish faction, but against a dedicated missile line, that's not going to be enough. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this Giant discussion. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.